God is good.
All the time.
And all the time.
God is good.
Some of you here can remember Harold Powers. Betty, she's got the thumbs up back there.
At Watauga Street Church of Christ. He was one of the elders, and he would come rake the leaves with the
one arm. Yeah.
Yes.
So you know, I thought he lost his arm in World War II. I realized it was afterward, once I got to know him, that he lost that arm working as a lineman. If you knew Harold, you may not know this. He was in the Marines, and in World War II, they dropped him off at Iwo Jima, you know, the one that we always think of where they raise the flag. They dropped him off 45 days before the invasion with just a backpack and his K-bar knife and his .45. He told me the story about it. So Harold and I, we got off to a stormy start. I would get up to preach. He'd go out in the foyer and kick the garbage can over. I'd preach and he'd tell the elders, I'll pay for Craig's moving truck. Let's get him out of here. This guy's terrible, right? He's from the devil. But we ended up having a great relationship over time. Tammy and Zach visited one day, Harold and Madge, and we ended up just having a great relationship. And in fact, before Harold passed away, he had some property, over 120 acres, up in the mountains by, somewhere up by Norton. I can't remember where it was, or the Pound, somewhere up there in Virginia. And he hadn't been up there in 20 years, and he wanted to walk it off. He wanted to look over his property. And so he asked if I would go up there with him, all right? So here's Harold, his one arm, and he's got a sidearm strapped on, just in case we see any snakes or bear, right? And I said, I'll drive. He says, no, I'll drive. Have you ever ridden with a man with one arm before? I'm just going to tell you, it's a different experience in the car. Well, truck, he had a little S10. And, of course, then he wanted to take me out for coffee, and we wanted to go by his favorite restaurant up there and all that. We just made a big day of it. But I share that story about Harold wanting to walk off his property because there's something about being able to assess your property, your possession, your dimensions that speak to ownership and protection. So, measuring, sizing up, it's helpful for reflection, but it also helps to show authority and dominion. Revelation chapter 11, John, now remember, he's been before the throne, he's been before the Lamb that was slain, the Lion of Judah, the one who receives the scroll, the one who breaks the seals. I was then given a measuring rod like a staff, he says. And I was told, rise and measure the temple of God and the altar and those who worship there. But do not measure the court outside, leave that out, for it was given over to the nations, and they will trample the holy city for 42 months. Now this rod in biblical times was 10 foot 4 inches long, and it was a common use for measuring. Like today we measure things by the yard, or if you're over in France, meter, which means measure. It's supposed to be 1/millionth of the circumference of the world, and it's off, by the way. The meter is wrong. It's not accurate, which is kind of funny. But anyway, so this rod, 10 foot 4 inches, and he is told to go and measure the temple of God. So you know this has to be a vision, because this is probably written in 90 A.D., and in 70 A.D., Jerusalem was sieged, and then the Romans came in and they tore down the temple. There was a great fire in the temple, and the gold gilding around the bricks, just like when you solder a pipe, it sucked back in the brick, so they tore every brick apart just so they could get the gold out. So the temple has already been destroyed. So you know this is a heavenly vision. Given a measure, I'm told, rise up and measure the temple of God, the altar, those who worship there. So the altar, the temple, and those who worship there. So it's measuring, but it's also counting up. Do not measure the court outside the temple. So the Jewish temple in the days of Jesus had 3 courts. Not like courtrooms, but different sections that were off. So the first place, that's just for the priests, right? And they have a place where the altar is, and behind that you have the Holy of Holies. Only the high priest could go in there once on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And according to tradition, they would tie a rope to his leg and put bells on him. If he offends God and God strikes him dead, no one's allowed to go in there and bring him out. So if the bells stop ringing, they know that God has struck him dead, and they just pull the rope and they drag the high priest out of there. But you've got that first court area. It's just for the priesthood. Then the second area that's measured off is for Jewish men. Right? You have to be one of the 12 tribes. You have to be Orthodox. You have to be all up to date on your festivals and sacrifices and all that great stuff. And then there was the third court. And that was for Jewish women and the Gentile world that wanted to try to get to know. So you see these layers of separation. And so in the Greek he says, do not measure the outside temple. Leave that out. It actually says drive out, cast out. Get rid of that part. It's given over to the nations. And I will grant authority to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. So I guess with Tennessee's loss last night, you guys understand what mourning is, right? What it means to be sad. And in that day, in the biblical days, the symbolism, if you wanted the world around you to know you were sad, you wore sackcloth. So it could be made of burlap type material, it could be made of camel hair, but it was rough clothing that was meant to agitate and irritate your skin. I don't quite comprehend it, but that's just an ancient practice to allow your mourning and your sorrow and your expressions, I guess, to be experiential, both physical and emotional. And so they're wearing this probably out of sadness for the state of humanity, of how bad things are. So there's been a lot of debate through the years theologically among those who live in ivory towers and walk the halls of biblical academia. Who are these 2 witnesses? So there's the idea of Joshua and Zerubbabel from back in the Old Testament. There's the idea of Moses and Elijah. There's lots of different things that are thrown out there. We don't really know who they are, but we know a little bit about their power. We know a little bit about their identity. We know a little bit about what they're tasked with. They're given great authority, right? So they're speaking on God's behalf. And these are the 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands. And you're saying, wait a minute, I just thought there's 2 witnesses. Now, 2 and 2 equals 4. Not exactly sure why all of a sudden they've gone from being 2 witnesses unless there's 2 parts to these witnesses. These are the 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands that stand before the Lord of the earth. Now, back in Revelation chapter 1, if you remember, as John is writing the 7 letters to the 7 churches, there's these lampstands that are before the throne. And by chapter 1, I believe it's verse 20, John says, and the 7 stars are this, and the 7 this, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches. So the lampstands represent the church. What's interesting about the olive tree, if you think about this, by the way, I brought some olive wood with me today, in case you want to see it. And for my next trip. So actually, this is a knife that Tammy got for me. I saw this knife at the knife store, and I really wanted it. It was $250, and I said, I can't spend $250 on a knife. And so Tammy found the same exact knife on Amazon for like $35. I was like, okay. I know it's a replica.
Pass it around.
Okay, yes. No, if you want to see it. So what's interesting about this is it's olive wood, and it's got a cross on it. If you want to see it, I'll toss it. You want to catch? Tammy will hand it back to you. So that's actual olive wood, and so it's a French knife, and it's supposedly was started back in the 1700s, and it was for the shepherds that go around, and the cross was on there because as good Catholics they want to have some type of cross. No, I'm not making this up, Dallas. As good Catholics they wanted to have a symbol of the cross with them, and so they would put it into their knife there. But that's actual olive wood there. The interesting thing about the olive wood and the lampstands that you and I don't normally make the contact with is, what type of oil did those lampstands use? Olive oil. And so the tree, the olive wood, the branch, this would represent the source for the actual lampstand itself, right? And so they've got power, they've got authority. If anyone would harm these two, fire pours forth from their mouth and consumes their foes. If anyone would harm them, this is how he is doomed to be killed. They have the power to shut the sky that no rain may fall. And if you look over some of this, I've seen a lot of overlap with some of the things that we've already seen in Revelation as far as things that are hammering the earth. Power to shut the sky, no rain may fall. Of course, that brings you back to a lot of Old Testament prophets, right? In the days during their prophecy, they have power over the waters to turn them into blood. We've already talked in Revelation how there's so much imagery and overlap between the exodus of Egypt and the exodus of Christians through this tumultuous time. Power to turn it into blood and strike the earth with every kind of plague as often as they desire. And when they finish their testimony, the beast, now is our introduction to the beast. And I almost, for anyone, Mike, you would appreciate this, anyone that loves good rock and roll, I almost put the Iron Maiden video up. The number of the beast, the video that starts off with the Wolfman, and I guess, I don't know if that's Vincent Price's voice in the background. Anyone with understanding, it's a number of man, the number of the beast. Da, 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 da. You're with me on Mike, I know you are. All right. And when they finish their testimony, the beast that rises from the abyss or the bottomless pit will make war on them and conquer them and kill them. And their dead bodies will lie in the great street that is symbolically, remember, there's a lot of imagery, a lot of metaphor in Revelation that is called Sodom and Egypt, where their Lord was crucified. Well, where was Jesus crucified? Jerusalem. So we know they're in Jerusalem. Sodom, that would be symbolic for sin. Egypt, for bondage. Jerusalem is a city of bondage and sin. It's corrupt, right? Jesus isn't killed because he's a good guy. He isn't killed because he's a bad guy. He's killed because politically, the high priesthood, the Jewish leadership, they want the people to follow them like they would a Messiah. They feel threatened by Jesus. They feel threatened by his position. Right? Pontius Pilate, when he's brought before him, I don't see anything wrong with this guy. I wash my hands. Oh, well, if you turn him loose, you're no friend of Caesar. Oh, what? Right? And so here he's crucified, and here they are killed. So, the beast, which is not the Antichrist. Don't ever confuse the two. The word Antichrist is never, ever, ever found in the book of Revelation. John, who writes the Gospel of John, who writes the book of Revelation, also wrote 3 other letters that are at the end of your New Testament. 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. 2 John chapter 2, I believe it's around verse 20, John will say, "You have heard that the Antichrist is coming, and I tell you that he has already come, and there are many of them." Antichrist is not a figure in the book of Revelation. The beast is. And we're going to hear more about the beast, but here is John's introduction for us to the beast. He rises from the bottomless pit. He makes war, and he kills the 2 witnesses, and it's end of the story, right? So everyone should just be sad, like Tennessee fans, and just give up. And I'm going to get a lot of mileage out of that one, Tal. I just can't tell you right now. You're leaving? Did you say I'm leaving?
I said Betty will get you.
Betty will get me. Yeah.
Not come to church anymore.
That would do it.
For 3.5 days, now the witnesses are dead in the street. For 3.5 days, some of the people from the peoples and tribes and languages of all that will gaze at their dead bodies and refuse them to be placed in a tomb. There's so much disrespect for these witnesses. There's so much contempt for them. They won't even let them have a proper burial. I remember when we lived in the Chicagoland area, I can't remember exactly when it was that the strike took place. But you know, there's a union for everything, right? And the Grave Diggers Union went on strike in Chicago, in the whole Chicagoland area. And nobody thought anything of it except for the Orthodox Jewish people. According to their rituals and traditions, you're supposed to be buried within 24 hours of your death. And so Skokie and a couple of the communities like that where there's a larger Jewish population, they were obviously rightly upset with the situation, because how are we going to bury our loved ones according to our religious tradition? So Jewish people, if they believe, you should be buried right away, you should have a proper burial, you should respect the dead, these guys are hanging out in the street. They refuse to bury them. Those who dwell on the earth will rejoice over them and make merry and exchange presents. And that's why we don't celebrate Christmas. No, I'm just kidding. Make merry and exchange presents, because these two prophets had been a torment to those who dwell on the earth. Could you imagine being so hated for your faith and your stance and your discipleship? Could you imagine being so hated that once you've been killed, people celebrate your death? That's how powerful their testimony was, how powerful their witness was. But after 3.5 days, a breath of life from God entered them. And they stood up on their feet, and great fear fell on those who saw them. Then they heard a voice, loud voice from heaven saying, "Come up here." And they went up to heaven. So, who are the two people in Scripture who didn't die but were caught up into heaven? Enoch and Elijah, right? Now, who's the third person who did die but his body was spiritually taken up to heaven? Moses. Jesus comes back to life in 40 days after the resurrection. He ascends. But God hides Moses' body, right? We don't ever know where it goes. So that's probably why a lot of people are trying to say, is this Enoch? Is this Elijah? Is this Moses? I don't know. But these two great witnesses, these two powerful prophets, they're caught up into heaven. And at that hour there was a great earthquake, and 1/10 of the city fell. 7,000 people were killed. So at this time, there are about 70,000 people that live in Jerusalem. And they were killed in the earthquake, and the rest were terrified and gave glory to God of heaven. The second woe is past. Behold, the third woe is about to come. So, short-lived celebration. They're all happy. Yay, they're dead. Let's give gifts. Yes, let's celebrate. Let's have a good time. And then, boom, they are raised and caught up to heaven. Why was everyone so happy they were killed? Because of their testimony. What are they saying that is so grievous and so offensive that people would want to see them dead, would want to be happy when they're dead, would celebrate over a brutal killing? Most people, in my experience in life, can handle anything you tell them except for the words "you're wrong." I could tell you how to change the brakes on your car. I could tell you how to trim the trees at your house. I could tell you what to set your thermostat on. I could tell you how to cook a roast beef. And everyone's like, "Oh, that sounds good, that sounds good." But the second you tell someone you're wrong, they hate you. And if you want them to hate you even further, tell them, not only are you wrong, but you don't have what it takes to figure it out. Your mental and emotional state is such that you can't figure the way out of being wrong. And in fact, you have no way to compensate for being wrong or the mistakes that you've made. That's only half of the story, though. The other half is, let's just say I tell you you're wrong. You're not smart enough to figure it out, and you're not capable enough to fix it. But what if I tell you there is someone who is smart enough, capable enough, able to fix it? And that person happens to be Jesus. Most of us like to be our own God. We like to be smart. We like to be capable. We like to be powerful. We like to be in control. These guys said, guess what? You're not smart enough. You're not brave enough. You're not strong enough. You're not capable enough. You're wrong. You're living in your wrongness. Let's just call it what it is, sin. But there's someone who has conquered sin. They've conquered the grave. They've conquered death. They've conquered eternity. And he's on your side and he loves you. I don't want to hear that. I want to hear you're really a good person at heart. You've got the best intentions. Just keep trying and it's all going to work out for the best. But that's not how it works. How does the church witness today in 2022? Is witnessing, is sharing the good news about everybody's made mistakes, but Jesus has overcome that, is that even a priority for us? Do we make it a priority to witness? How did these guys witness? Verbally, obviously, they've got a message that they're telling. Obviously, they stay faithful in the face of persecution. And obviously, they're a persistent presence in the community of Jerusalem. There they are in the street. They're witnessing, they're testifying, they're talking, they're doing miracles, they're doing all this stuff. And they pay a sacrificial price for it. What is our witness? What is our testimony? What is our message to the world around us today? Is it that as believers we're better people? Is it as believers we're more equipped than the non-believers? We can't really say we're any different than non-believers. Can we say that? I mean, you walk into Chick-fil-A on Saturday or Monday. I guess you won't walk in there today. Well, you won't walk in the one in Kingsport right now at all. And it might be the Lord's chicken in there, but can you really tell a difference in the people who are there? When you go into Walmart, when you go to Albert's Pawn Shop over here, wherever you may find yourself, can you really tell a difference between who's a believer and who isn't? Is that what our testimony is? I'm smarter, I'm better, I'm more equipped to have all the answers. I'm different than the rest of the world. If that's our witness, we fall flat on our face. If it is at all about us, we've missed the point. Should our witness be, Jesus is better than the crowd. Jesus is more equipped than the crowd. Jesus is different than the crowd. And with all I have in my heart, I want to be like him. That's where my heart is taking me. That is what my pursuit is. In other words, I guess I could have just saved us all 20 minutes. I could have just stood up here and said, is our witness about us or is it about Jesus? But then I couldn't have got the jabs in on Tennessee. I don't know who the two witnesses are here, and I don't know if they've already been slaughtered. I don't know if it's a future event. See, 15 years ago, I would have told you I already knew all the answers, but I'm learning that I don't. I don't really know if they've already been here or if they're coming in the future, but I know that their witness, their testimony is an example for us. Is it about ourselves or is it about Jesus? I want to leave you with a passage from Mark chapter 8. Calling the crowd to himself, Jesus, with his disciples, said to them, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? For what can a man give in return for his soul? For whoever is ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him will the Son of Man also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with his holy angels. Let's stand.